Could I ask the panel to come up and join us on stage? And there is also an addition. Margot is joining us too. I don't think she's listed. And you've actually sat in the right places. Thank you, everybody. Brilliant. Right. It's been a very, very interesting day. And there's been a lot of topics raised. I think those presentations just now in terms of a DRTV turning into an integrated digital campaign case study, and the two presentations, one talking about some advances in the actual audience measurement and maybe getting to some form of single measurement. And what Stefan just told us about there in terms of how TV and digital working together, not in isolated silos, in integration, brings me to sort of begin to start asking some questions back to where, in fact, Nikki started this morning about the right message. In terms of creativity, what I want to just start to explore is how the new digital world, and indeed the digitization of television, gives us some more creative opportunities potentially in terms of putting over those essential brand messages, whether they be at a brand equity level at the top of the funnel or some form of activation message at the bottom. As new kids on the block, I would start the conversation with you, Nick. Yep. And just as we go along, and we'll move down one at a time, just introduce yourself, what you do, and just your answer to that first question. Yep, hello everyone. So Nick Callahan from Facebook, work as an agency partner, so work very closely with Omnicom as an agency group here in the UK. So in terms of the question around creativity, and I think it's I guess, sort of from my point of view and our point of view where we sit, quite an interesting time. I think we're at this kind of a bit of a fork in the road right now with creativity. I think there's equal opportunity and challenges we're seeing right now in the market. I think there's some exciting opportunities around more future-facing technologies, so looking at more rich, immersive content. So we're seeing a lot of work and a lot of brands where people are starting to test their 360 content, VR, AR. I think the scale of that is quite limited at the moment, and I think there's only a few brands that are really sort of starting to dip their toe in. But we are, interestingly, we're working with other like OTT and TV kind of brands who are actually promoting TV shows in that way. So actually, rather than taking a classic TV trailer and just sticking it online, they're putting you inside the head of a character from the show and kind of having this immersive, kind of experience. And also, for example, shows like Netflix have done some really interesting work with shows like Stranger Things. We've had really rich, immersive 360 content. I think when that comes to TV, though, I think the challenge there is the current model. The kind of 30-second TV ad spot it just doesn't work, because I think the kind of the beauty of those experiences is you need time to consume them and to really immerse yourself in them. And I think in that 30-second sort of, kind of classic ad spot world, you don't really have that. So I think there's a challenge there as to how does that translate itself maybe to other platforms like TV. So I think there's exciting times there, and I think that a big challenge for us and other mobile platforms is the notion of taking a 30-second TV ad and simply sticking it onto a mobile device, which is very different. So I'm sure we'll get into that a bit more later. That's a big challenge for us. Absolutely. Okay. Mark.
Hello, Mark. I'm Head of Strategy at Arena Media, part of the Havas Media Group. I suppose I'll answer this question from a strategist or a planner's point of view, which is, from my perspective, there hasn't been a time that I've been in the industry, which is roughly about 12 years, where the opportunity to play with TV, AV or video, whatever you want to describe it, as a medium from which you can do creative and nuanced things, it's never been better, really, from my perspective. It's made it possible to really rethink and reframe how we structure and plan TV from a strategic and also creative point of view. I think you can have many more different layers from your plan, all the way up, starting with classic linear TV, right down to how we work in news feeds, how we work with influencers, how we get the most value out of partnerships and sponsorships. And for every single client that we work with, I think you can find that there is a a unique way of doing it for that client based on the options that are out there. So I think even though it's very definitely a much more complex space, I think it's undoubtedly also a much more exciting space from our point of view, and allows us to do better work for clients. And as long as we know that work is paying back, we'll push the boundary as far as we can do.
Is that going through a nascent stage, or is that actually now really being taken up and getting some traction?
From our perspective, it's getting traction. Obviously, you have to kind of look at it from a brand by brand view and what brands are willing to invest into. But to make it real, I was happy to see a Domino's example up on your slides, as they're a client of ours. 3 or 4 years ago, they would have looked like a very traditional TV advertiser, blocks of campaign media spend across a year, delivering products and promotional messages over time that did a fine job for them. That plan that shape of use of TV looks incredibly different 3 or 4 years now. We use linear TV for what it's good at, which is getting good propositions and messages about the brand out at scale. We invested a lot more in partnerships and sponsorships that deliver horizontally across the plan and a reputation with occasions. We sweat everything out of those, from the idents that we use all the way through to using talent from programs to creating pizza offers around those programs and deals. Do a lot in social video, and work with influencers to extend advertising ideas out and make them more playful. And so it's a much richer place to be, and all of those things are there for a purpose. They do a specific job. They're complementary across the plan, and the proof is in the pudding. Our measured ROI on what we get from TV has doubled over that same period. So we know that stretching TV in that way does work. We're not just doing it for the sake of it.
Okay. I'm going to jump to Eric in a second, then I'll come back to you, Stefan. But in terms of, Mark, your strategic level discussion with client, are you now finding it the norm that these sort of creative opportunities are coming up early in the big idea conversation?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's definitely an understanding on client side, from my experience, that we have to be thinking above and beyond the way we have thought about TV for many, many years. Not only because every client or brand we work with to some degree is challenged to stand out and to make their investment work harder than ever, but I think they can see the creative opportunity. They pay attention to what happens in the industry, and you can even if you just look at the broadcast space, it's very clear that traditional broadcasters in the UK are investing a lot more in creative solutions, in working with brands to do things that stand out, and that's just picking one bit of that layer, which is the broadcast world. And those advertisers see what's going on there. They see that those things generate cut through. They see that they get attention and help to build brands, and they undoubtedly want us to push us to think in those terms.
Which is a lovely segue to a client, very large client, Eric. Please introduce yourself, and then if you could give an example, your experience within this space in terms of how these new opportunities may be affecting your organisation.
Sure. Well, hello everyone. My name is Eric Williams. I'm from PepsiCo. I work in the fast-paced world of porridge. So it's constant change and evolution in that segment. But no, I mean, if I look back at the brand even 2 years ago, we were very much a traditional TV first. I would say 95 plus of our spend was going towards TV. I think what digital has brought us the opportunity of doing is certainly being more reactive. And I think from even the most simple variable, Brits eat more porridge when it's cold out. That's such a core basis of what our business is all about. And digital allows us that flexibility to react to something like weather, which, though the BBC does their best to predict it 14 days out, we do struggle with getting that day-to-day sensitivity. So I think digital has allowed us to do some different things in terms of being reactive to temperature. We're running a brand new TV campaign talking about Buzz Aldrin. He was featured in the Axe ad as well. Something like the supermoon was a perfect example where we weren't necessarily planning for that, but again, we have the flexibility to react again. Conversely, though, I think what we're challenged with and what we're challenging our agencies with is when we're telling these traditional 30-second brand stories, it tends to start from that TV lens, and the story builds very slowly, and we assume this natural progression of a 30-second narrative. We then try and transpose that message onto digital, and then we find ourselves asking, well, you've got 3 seconds, the brand's got to go first, and people are going to stop paying attention after that point, unless it's a really great story. So we've built this really elaborate and beautifully crafted, narrative, and now all of a sudden we've got to flip it completely upside down, and that continues to be a challenge, because you've got to tell the story in two very different ways.
When we heard earlier today, I think it was from the Santander client, saying production costs are such that where you have such well-crafted creative, actually to produce additional versions for a digital environment, perhaps of a shorter length or even a longer length, are prohibitive in terms of the budget share. Is that something that you guys are facing too?
Certainly, and in the end, that comes back to the ROI question, right? The more we are devoting to those non-working costs, the trickier that ROI conversation becomes. So, again, it's all about balance. Apparently, there was a big elaborate balance move in one of the earlier sessions, but no, it becomes a challenge where we've just got to strike the right amount of reactive and dynamic creative and manage the production costs on the other end.
Okay, and back to you, Stefan, in terms of a media agency again, but more from the executional implementation side. How are you being challenged by your clients in addition to what you just showed us in the examples there?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more and more clients doing video-only campaigns rather than TV campaigns. So, and even if they are doing TV, they're making bespoke video creative. So we are seeing that coming through. We're seeing a lot of clients use interactive formats, so adding to their video with something to try and engage users. We're talking to clients about things like dynamic creative optimization in video. Again, obviously that comes back to the production costs. I was at an event a few weeks ago, and I did hear a client say, actually, a lot of that, and probably Eric will talk to this better, but it'll be about how you kind of template your ads before you go into the shoot and how you manage your shoot on the day. So I think the example that they gave was, actually, I used to, spend 2 weeks in South Africa filming a 30-second TVC. Now,
oh, those were the days.
Now, sort of in a day and a half, I can create 20 versions of essentially the same message told in slightly different ways. So I think that there are ways to make it work commercially and still have that creativity in video. Obviously, the cost is always going to be the big factor, but I think we'll start to see some brands really take it on.
So in terms of those creative executions driving some form of response or outcome or decision or action, does that continue then to be an online reaction, or is it also driving offline activity?
It's both, essentially, and we're, again, kind of going back to linking data sources, constantly trying to understand how we can merge kind of offline sales data. Because, a lot of our clients now, they do have a single customer view. They are able to link their kind of online customers and their offline customers. And if we can take that data and link it with the media, then it's obviously a really powerful thing. So, I think that video can still be accountable. And then when you start to layer in, well, actually, which creatives have driven that and kind of start to go into the detail of it, it can become really interesting.
So we get into a world where we've got proper attribution, not just modelled attribution.
Yeah.
Okay. And Margot, how in the hell do we measure all of this stuff?
Yeah, that gives me a job. It's okay. Yes, I think that is our challenge to keep going, and it's how do we measure it in a way that is transparent and auditable and not taxing on panelists, and there are all sorts of channels in that challenges in that, and that it has the standard of occurrency. I think we're in the world where you guys all trade millions of pounds on this. It has to be right. They can't, which is, to your earlier point about, I wish I could wave a magic wand and make it all happen overnight. But actually, I have to do it in a way that means there is no, that it is stands up to the scrutiny of occurrency.
So building on that, I'm going to ask some more questions, guys. Here, building on that, the whole area of attribution, analytics, data supporting decisions, and smart data, not just big data. That is a very fragmented world currently, and this isn't a pop, by the way. It is difficult. and it varies country by country, it varies by companies, and varies by vendors. I mean, how are Facebook attacking this sort of area in terms of trying to provide that sort of decision support data?
So we're generally speaking, I think we've been open and still are open to working with a number of the main third parties, the kind of the Nielsen's, the kind of, in fact we're talking to Barb at the moment about kind of other future projects. So I think we're very keen and open to have those conversations about how do we effectively plug into some of these bigger measurement systems. Appreciate that but it is just a huge challenge, I think, to take something that the size of that Facebook has in the UK, almost as a panel, if you like, and plug that into an already existing kind of large panel. But yeah, I think we obviously we have internal measurement solutions as well, but we've been very open and continue to be open to working with a number of the kind of biggest and most well-known kind of parties as well. So I think the message is we're kind of open for conversations then. If people have suggestions and ideas as to how else we do that, then as I say, we're actively speaking to people like Barb right now. Very tentative conversations, but we're trying to kind of find a solution that people is going to work with people who have.
Well, certainly from GroupM, I can tell you we encourage you to do that, and I know that Nikki would say the same from OMD. Havas's point of view on that is pretty similar, I suspect. And I've already spoken for Stefan. In terms of these challenges, though, Stefan, from a strategic level, you're starting sorry, Stefan, I beg your pardon, Mark. You're starting the process at a strategic level in terms of the comms plan.
Indeed.
How has that changed in the last couple of years in terms of the availability of a lot of this digitally sourced information?
Well, of course, there's now a lot more data available to us that we're able to use to make a judgment or assess how we invest and why we invest, and alongside classic things like market mix modelling, we now have TV attribution modelling. We've got obviously client-side analytics, and all this. A lot of it is all kind of valid in its own right. I think the trick for us is we know that often these data sets or these methodologies give us a perspective on ROI in certain extent. And from a planning point of view, I suppose what we're interested in is judging the right balance between the long-term and short-term effects of our investment in AV. And I think there's a risk if you focus too much on data solutions that are focused on the here and now attribution, or you just looking at your analytics and making correlations to TV, whatever it might be, that everything is looked looked at from a very short-term perspective. And of course, the value in TV is that it often drives longer-term value, ROI, equity, and salience. So we always go to clients and say, you have to start from the point of view that there is a lot of useful data available out there and useful tools that we should absolutely make use of, but we have to accept that there is no single version of the truth. You have to start from that perspective, and you have to have a grown-up conversation about what different methodologies and ways of measuring investment, what lens they give you on that answer, and then come together and form a view as to how it's all working together. And that's the way we would try and make sense of it all. Use what's available, but don't treat everything at face value.
So, Stefan, moving to the executional side of the media process, you of course do need the truth, because that's what the client's paying. I mean, is the current situation a tenable one for the media agency and the advertiser in terms of multiple currencies, multiple metrics, and even multiple ways of measuring the same metric?
I think no. I think everything needs to be brought together a lot more. And as you know, I'm sure a lot of people have read of Brian Gleason's announcement yesterday about M-Platform and MID, and just trying to kind of tie everything together. Clients are demanding that we can kind of buy a report, measure on a kind of a set currency, if you will, or kind of at least have a full view. So I think that will massively help. In terms of the kind of balance between digital and TV, with a lot of digital activity is very short term, as you say, and then you kind of look at DRTV. It, again, is very performance driven, addressable by its very nature, and the targeting will probably be performance driven. And kind of there'll be a lot of brands who want to be able to trade and execute programmatically across, for example, the daytime schedule, so DRTV advertisers. but you need to kind of weigh that with the long-term game as well. So those top 20 channels and the peak time that's delivering those races in those channels may well have a different metric to what we're trading on daytime TV, but we still need a way for planning and analysis to be able to tie it all back together at the end.
Understood. Yep. So Eric, you've heard from a vendor, you've heard from the planning side and from the executional side. Are you any clearer yet in terms of, for you guys, in terms of how you're getting your ROI measured and reported?
I mean, honestly, the sheer volume of data that's coming in right now is quite staggering. It feels like every new tool, every new channel that we go to, there's new measures, there's a new Excel spreadsheet heading, or I should say, screaming towards my inbox. And I mean, I think from my perspective, we struggle with actionable data points. Certainly measuring ROI is an important way to look in the mirror, but I think what we can't forget is how do we improve going forward. There's a bit of backwards looking in a lot of the data that we're receiving right now, and I'd be eager to understand what this looks like as we start getting decisions or data points, that help us make better decisions tomorrow. Not for next year's planning, not for 5 years on. How do we start becoming more responsive? And I think that'll just be a continued ask from the client side.
So are you talking here about iterative short-term predictive analytics and forecasting based on the previous data sets?
I think so, and I think that certainly comes with a greater level of risk from a client standpoint, but I think moving forward and kind of moving into this new world, I think we'd be more comfortable with ever-evolving hypotheses than this really long-term, we want to take our time, we want to analyze all the data, we want to look back. I think we've got to get more and more comfortable on the client side about being responsive and accepting that that'll come with a higher degree of risk.
And would you expect that to be third-party or at least third-party validated, verified information? Or is still first party is obviously your competitive advantage, but there's an awful lot of other data that needs to come in, that comes from third party or from the media vendor. But do you need it to be verified and validated and checked?
I feel like that's quite the loaded question.
It is very.
The audience here.
Because we're finishing shortly.
I can certainly taste that drink now. But no, if I'm perfectly honest, yes, of course, verified and validated is the ideal scenario. But no, we have to be smarter. We have to be faster. This is where this is all heading, and I think the brands, the companies, the organizations that are out there winning are certainly taking their lumps along the way. But I think they're taking the chances and they're being first to do so.
Well, I think that's a very consistent advertiser-client message coming across to us in the industry. So, can the media research companies help us?
It's funny. I think some of these questions are ones that are just age-old questions. I have been in the industry long enough to know that what sort of questions we ask now around data were questions that we might have asked around research 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah. And looking in the rearview mirror, that's a long-held thing. And I think it does mean that there are different. I guess I'd say there are different. It does mean as researchers we have to have slightly different skills in that it's about taking that, going from the data, and I think from researchers as well as from clients and everybody else, it's taking a leap. It's saying, okay, here are the figures, here's what it is, and here's me and what I know about people and all the other stuff I've got, and therefore what I add on top of that to give you the insight to help to make decisions. So I think you're right that there's in some ways to get to that more forward-looking and more insightful. You do have to accept a degree of risk with that, but I think that's acceptable risk where you are leaping across.
Thank you. Let's just break there for a second. Any pressing, urgent questions that anybody would like to ask in the last 5 minutes? There's a lot of tongues hanging out already for drinks, I think. Okay, in which case I'll ask a final question. And we'll just go down one at a time. So sorry, Margot, you come last.
I'll be very quick.
There's a lot of great stuff here, and genuinely, gentlemen, and Margot, I've learned something from talking to you this afternoon. But the big question in my mind is what are the barriers? So could you each give me one barrier that you think is going to slow down? It's not going to stop, but barriers that are going to slow down the process of actually getting to where we want to be.
I think there's two, but I know I'll give you
No,
one.
just
so
one.
I'll give you one.
Somebody else will want the other one.
But probably around that creative challenge.
Yeah.
I think, trying to kind of speak maybe a little bit on behalf of kind of, I guess, more the mobile kind of world and, the social kind of world. I think there's just a huge challenge and a barrier we see that this, the kind of between creative agencies, media agencies. I think it was kind of mentioned that a lot of, the thinking, the planning when it comes to TV and AV and videos often starts with that 30-second TV spot, and it's like everything stems from there. Mm-hmm. And I think if you think about the way consumers consume AV now, they don't think, so well, I must watch it on a TV first and then follow it elsewhere across devices. They just think, I need to get to that content in the quickest, easiest way I'm going to get to it. And I think we're not thinking about that in that way when we think about how we design for different devices. So I think creativity, certainly from what we're seeing, is a big challenge. Obviously, there is an opportunity there as well, but I also think that's a big challenge. And how do we get creative agencies really engaged? I think they're accepting of it; they know that, but they're not adopting that technique of changing it from a 30-second to actually building for different platforms.
Great, thank you, Nick. Mark.
I would probably have said the creative as well, but I'll give a different answer. I think there's probably going to be, it's going to probably get harder to measure ROI on a like-for-like basis across a lot of the different activities we would consider to be AV, which all operate simultaneously, often in layers, whether that's social video, whether that's broadcast VOD, whether that's what we do with influencers, etc., all the way up, often at the same time and doing slightly different roles. And I think whereas at the moment we can probably isolate those activities on their own, sometimes in the environment that they're in, a conversion directly here, understanding how they perform on a like-for-like basis, so we can make decisions about which of those things is worth investing more time from a planning, media, and also creative is difficult, because the more we can do just means that it becomes harder and more complex to decouple these things. So I think that's part of our challenge.
Brilliant, thanks, Mark. Stefan.
I think creative is a challenge, and I think it's one that will be overcome in time through getting creative agencies on board, and also a lot of media agencies with their own content divisions kind of helping towards that now. For me, I think the main challenge will be the commercials. So how much data it will be shared, by who, to what level. Obviously, there's a lot of money riding on that data a lot of the time, and to ask for full transparency across the whole market, I think is a huge ask, and it's hard to see that we'll ever get there fully. I think we can implement solutions that will be better than what we have now, but whether we ever get to the point where it's unrestricted data access for everyone, I just don't see it.
Thank you very much. Eric.
I think from my perspective, the one hurdle that I think about is just the pace of progress. It feels like at times we're inching forward, at times we're sprinting forward. You look at these other industries, you look at an Uber and Airbnb, those weren't micro changes. That it was an earth-shaking lightning bolt type of change, and it feels like these are going to be small incremental gains. And hopefully all of the bright minds gathered in a room like this can produce the innovation to help make that kind of big transformative leap forward.
That is a very, very clear challenge to the industry. Thank you, Eric. Margot.
We have lots of challenges. I'm going to be, slightly dull and say, at the moment, I think I'm as we head into a post-Brexit world, I do find myself worrying more about cost as a barrier. I mean, we have lots of measurement needs. They don't come cheaply. It is quite a lot to do, and in having lived through several different recessions in time, research and measurement is often one of those areas quite easy to cut. And actually we're going to a place where people are going to be feeling, we think, people will be feeling the pinch more, companies are. Cost will be an issue just at a moment where actually we need more stuff, which is quite complicated to do.
Thank you, Margot. Before we thank the panel, I'd just like to ask Derek to come and join us back up on stage.
I just wanted to thank you all very much for your support for the day. I hope you've enjoyed the day. Apologies to anyone who didn't get a seat early in the morning. We had far too many people here, and we need to move to a bigger venue next year. So sorry about that, and same with a bit of queuing. So a few apologies for us. Hope you'll join us for a drink at 5:30. Many thanks to Simon, and big thanks to the panel for
and
the
also
afternoon.
To Claudia.
And to our presenters from earlier. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.